Hello and welcome to the Womb-Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Jessica now. This will be my first podcast recording with my transition to back to my birth name, Jessica. So I almost said Sama. I've been such in a habit of using that name, and we're transitioning to a new name. And I have a guest here, Raymora, who's also been in the midst of a name transition. So we both had to change our names on the Zoom window here. So Raymora agreed to come on the show and talk about ancestral healing as the topic of the day as we're moving into the autumn time and into the winter time. Ancestral healing is a lovely time of year. Of course, many people connect with the ancestors around this time of year. Later, get more and more as we move towards October. But it's also something that many people focus on all the time, year round. For me, it's become a year-round practice, and we just feel that maybe perhaps more of a connection as we get into the fall and winter season. So it may be different for people in southern hemispheres too. Anyway, just a few reflections about connecting with the ancestors just to get us started off. And so Raymora, I'd love for you to introduce yourself a little bit more and share about your experience with ancestral healing.
Well, my name is Raymora, and for me, it's a personal journey. It's not like a ritual of finding a certain ancestor to go that way. It's more of a personal journey that I've been on, and it started with my dad and our relationship. When he was here, our relationship was very rocky, and then through the process of his death, and our relationship has healed. And in my life and in my family's life, there's lots of sexual abuse with women, and so I know that healing my relationship with my father and feeling his energy, and we have a communication when he talks, I know that has healed the past and is going to heal the present. And my children, my daughters, their relationship has been healed from that kind of situation.
Wow, this is amazing. So what I'm hearing you share about is that you had a difficult relationship with your father when he was alive. And then when he passed away, there was some kind of healing process that happened for you that feels like it has healed things that have happened in the past. And it's healing how you feel in the present. And it's also healing your daughter's experience. Is that what you're telling us?
Yes.
And that this was all spontaneous experience on your part? Was it something that you studied or learned from anyone, or it just was happening on its own?
It's a little bit of both, because it was probably around the same time that the research came out about that our mothers were in all of that ancestry stuff. All that information was in our grandmothers, and then our mothers, and then us. And that's where it started. And it started with my connection with my dad here. My father, when he was here on this earth plane, was an alcoholic and had a lot of trauma within himself, that he did a lot of things that he shouldn't have been, and he wouldn't have done if he wasn't an alcoholic. And through that process, understanding the complexity of being human, it started to heal my relationship. And then when he died, I needed something that would kind of create a healing that between the two of us. And I would ask him to come and show me a sign that he was around, and I would feel him holding my hands like I was a little girl, like I wanted that when I was a kid. So that's where it all started. So it was a little bit of both.
Wow. So you learned about research, or there's been a common awareness or a growing awareness about the connection we have with our ancestors, where our DNA, the egg that made you and I, was present in our mother when she was in our grandmother's womb, and going back and back and back, so that anything that happened to grandma when she was pregnant with our mom was also happening to us. And this depth of overlap and experience, and there's been more and more research and awareness. I mean, indigenous peoples and peoples that have intact ancestral reverence practices and lifestyles, this is no news to them. But those of us whose ancestral traditions of ancestor reverence have been wiped out from various historical annihilation of various traditions, we've been disconnected from that, and a lot of immigration to the United States involved that. A lot of stuff that went on in Europe leading up to the immigration to the United States created that disconnection. A lot of, displacement and violent claiming of land ownership by wealthy elite, and all of this kind of stuff, made it impossible to keep a lot of those ancestral reverence traditions alive, because people were being murdered for practicing those traditions. And even indigenous people have been murdered, and especially, and still are being murdered for practicing those traditions. And likely my ancestors and your ancestors assimilated to this disconnected way of life, of not paying homage to or connecting with ancestry, because there was such a violent persecution of anyone talking to their ancestors, like you were just describing, right? And so now the scientists are saying, oh, hey, wait a second, we are connected with whether, and that there is something to this, and that whatever happened to grandma is still affecting us today. Whatever happened to even to grandpa and whatever is still affecting us today. And this is confirming what all of those traditions have said, all along. And so here we are, in the most natural way, rediscovering that, oh my goodness, whatever pain my father was in after he died, if I connect with him, we can continue the healing process. And it sounds to me like the healing process had already started for you before he passed away, and that it sounds like you were learning to have some compassion for him, and perhaps he may have even recognized some of the errors of his ways, of his alcoholism and like that, and that you had some kind of connection around that, of him owning it perhaps in some way, to probably somewhat of a limited capacity. Did he ever recover from his alcoholism or get sober?
No, he called me when I was 42 in the hospital after I'd given birth to my daughter, and apologized. He had beginning stages of Alzheimer's and dementia because of his drinking.
Wow.
So I don't know what he was apologizing for, but in my heart, there's sexual abuse with my father. And I know that for me, that's what that was. And so when he when that happened, it created this opening of seeing him in a different way, and my heart being more open to seeing his humanity, opposed to, I always grew up that he was this monster. Why could he have done this to us?
Mm-hmm.
And going through all of that, it did create that door to be opened.
Wow. So some part of him at some point in his probably, the development of the dementia, some part of him opened up where he became aware of, oh my goodness, I need to apologize to my daughter. And he might not have been able to articulate it to you, is what I'm hearing. He didn't necessarily say in words why, but you could feel in his spirit that he was feeling what he had done. And then that seems to have continued, because then when he died, it sounds like you were in communication with his spirit after he died. Now, was this something that was common in your family, or did you just initiate that kind of communication on your own? What inspired you to attempt to communicate with your dad after he died?
Well, my first experience of having a connection with somebody that had died was with my spirit son. After my spirit son died, I could not live with the fact that he was just gone. And after he was born, I asked him, I said, please just show me that you're here. And at that point, he was always on my left side. And at that point, I felt this gentle touch on my side of my left side.
Wow.
And since his birthday is next month, on the 26th. And he was born 24 years ago. And ever since then, I've had a relationship with him. And so when people say, how many kids do you have? I say 7, because he isn't here in his body, but we've always had a relationship since he was born.
Wow. So how old was he when he died?
He died when I was given birth.
So he was alive in your womb until the moment of birth and the process of birth. It just
he had a knot in his cord, so when I went into labor is when he died.
I'm so sorry. That's really hard. And yet it seems like he's been with you the whole time. And what a gift of being able to experience so strongly this connection to the spirit world. And so was that the first time you'd ever had that kind of connection with anyone?
I know that I felt people around me, like my favorite grandmother that I never met. I know that she's always been around me, but there's just an inner knowing. I've never felt her, so to speak, around me. And one of my good friends at 34 died of breast cancer, and I feel her around. But yeah, that's about, I know there's others, but I couldn't say who.
So
those 3.
Right. So with your grandmother and your friend, you can feel them around, but you don't necessarily feel them touching your skin like you described with your spirit son and with your father.
Right.
Wow. So this connection with your spirit son really opened up something, a capacity for you, and an awareness, and you have this long-term, very intimate, it sounds like, relationship with your spirit son, which I can imagine being very impactful for you. Can you share a little bit more about that? Like, I can just imagine you as a grieving mom. And then having this experience of, oh wait, my son is still here and I get to have a relationship with him just in the spirit form. I can imagine that having a very big impact on you in all areas of your life. Can you share about that?
Yeah, it had both kinds of it, because I did go through depression and grief for a long time, for 16 years, until I could really let that go. But it also created this sacred relationship that I have with him. And it started out with, I would write with my right hand and he would answer with the left. And I remember him telling me that all babies are born, there's always two babies, and they either stay as spirit, they either become twins, or they're just there was a third one, I can't remember. And then about 4 years ago, I was reading an article that said the same exact thing. And for me, it was just this wonderful journey that we've been on, and some of the things that he had shared with me about spirit and babies was not available, was not out there. And now he's sharing that with me. He had shared that with me. Now it's a reality.
Wow. So was this a regular practice for you of
it was
writing out conversations with your son?
Yeah.
And it still probably is.
I've done it with my son, my dad, and my friend that died of breast cancer.
Okay, so that's when you started that practice, was when your friend died, and then it was right there and available for you when your son died.
Well, I had started at 16 writing letters to God. And that's where that's all, the writing, where I always go is writing. So that's where that all started, when I was 16.
Okay, so you would have conversations with God, with the divine, and then when your friend died, it was a natural progression to that. And then certainly when your son died, there was a natural progression. So this was a well practiced process for you of receiving information in that way, receiving connection, and really connecting to the spirit world. Wow, beautiful. So then can you share a little bit more about this? Because I'm curious, a couple of things. I'm really curious about the healing. It sounds like your spirit son had perhaps more than just this one bit of information about the different ways that babies come into the world. Perhaps there were other things that your spirit son shared with you during those written conversations that were healing for you. Can you share about that?
Well, some of the things I don't remember because I've written them down in 24 years ago.
Right.
But other things, like he told me that I was going to have a daughter, and he was born in September, and in October I was pregnant with our daughter.
Wow.
And she was supposed to be born in October and came in September. They're a year and 3 days apart.
Wow.
Yeah. And then he told me I was going to have my other daughter when my first daughter was born, and he said it was either 6 weeks or 6 months that he told me that I was going to have another baby. Tara has her own time frame.
Okay.
Autumn and Tara are 4.5 years apart. So that was just like, when are you coming?
Oh, so you had to wait. But he told you she was coming, but you had to wait for when it was the right time for her. Yeah.
And I also journaled when I was waiting to conceive Autumn. I was always journaling to her. And so same with Tara. I don't know if I have them all, but I have all these journals that I wrote to them.
Oh, this was before they were even conceived.
Yes.
And then so you knew they were coming because your spirit son had told you. and then you were writing to them
Yeah.
and getting to know them through this writing process before they were even
Yeah.
conceived. And then did you also get to know them during your pregnancy? And then before they could even speak, did you continue that writing
Yes,
process?
I didn't do that.
Uh-huh. And then
Yes.
and then how did that, and then was that first daughter, was that your first child that grew up enough to be able to speak with a physical voice? Or did you have other children before
Yeah.
her?
No, my first child that was born, Aaron has a big story. He came to me 3 times. The first time he was a twin with my son, and that process, Gus was 2 when we were at the kitchen table, and August said, "You know, I am so angry with Aaron." And I said, "No, Gus, why?" And he said, "Because when I was in your belly and my eyes were closed and I opened them, he was gone." And I knew in my heart that that was a truth.
Ah.
And so he had come that time, and it came when then Gus was first, then Aaron was second, then Autumn, then Tara,
Wow.
and then Jazzy.
Okay, so Gus was your first son, and
Yeah.
and he told you that Aaron had been in your womb with him, but that
Yeah.
didn't for some reason, Aaron didn't come to full term. Okay.
Yes.
But Gus was born and lived and eventually started talking with you. Were you writing to Gus in the womb or before he was conceived? Did you know Gus was coming?
I had been going to a meditation class, and the friend I had at the time was next to me in the meditation, and she said, I did in the meditation, I saw you with a baby with really curly hair, and my husband happens to be African American, and we weren't even dating at the time. I didn't even know that. And then I had Gus.
So then you met your husband, and then there was Gus.
Yeah.
You hadn't really started writing to your babies on the way yet, though. So
I didn't start that until Aaron.
So Gus came first.
Yeah.
Gus came first, but you didn't write to Gus on the way.
Mm-mm.
No. But then when
Aaron, yes, I did write. I did write to Gus. I forgot. Because I have his baby journal before he was born, and then a little after. So I did write to Gus.
Okay, so that you continue.
But
go ahead.
Gus's letters were different because I was documenting what was happening during that period. I wasn't waiting for Gus to reply.
Interesting. So they weren't conversational. They were just more documentary style. And so, right? Okay, so you're keeping a record of what's happening, and maybe you would share it with him later in life, that kind of thing. Okay, right. And so then when you then what made you start to write to Aaron? Was it before he was conceived, or after he was conceived, or what made it a conversation?
It was after he was conceived. With Aaron, with Gus, I was ecstatic. I was like, I can't believe I'm gonna have a baby. With Aaron, I could not. There was something that was blocking my connection to Aaron until 2 weeks before he was born.
Oh, wow.
And then I felt connected to him.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So in your desire to connect with him, that's when you started writing these conversational journals?
Yeah. Right
Uh-huh.
after he was born, I started.
Oh, after he was born, you started. I thought you said you were writing them before he was born. Aaron.
No,
No.
I don't, no, not Aaron. Gus, I was. Aaron, I don't believe I was writing him before he was born because I couldn't connect to him, and I was talking to him a lot. And I actually had gone to a therapist,
Uh-huh.
and the therapist said to me, because I was seeing, because I couldn't connect, and I had told her, I don't remember this, but I told her that I didn't think that my baby was going to stay. And she called me for some charity that she was doing, and she said, well, how's the baby? And I said that he isn't here, or didn't make it. And she said, oh my God, you told me that you didn't think he was going to stay. And that's when I was like 3 months pregnant.
So I'm not real clear. You knew you were pregnant, but you didn't think the
But
baby
I couldn't
was
connect
stay.
to the baby.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't, no matter what. And I don't remember telling her that,
Mhm.
but I had told, the therapist told me, she said, when I called her, she said, you told me that you didn't think that the baby was going to stay.
Uh-huh. And then there was a moment when you were 3 months pregnant when you were feeling like the baby wasn't there anymore.
When I was 3 months pregnant, I went to a therapist because I couldn't connect to Aaron.
Uh-huh.
And I don't remember telling her this, but I told her I didn't think my baby was going to stay.
Previous to
And
that, previous to
yeah,
the
and
therapy.
then
Uh-huh.
after I had Aaron, she had called, and she goes, how's the baby? And I said, the baby didn't make it. And she goes, oh my God, you told me in therapy that you didn't think he was going to stay.
I see. So Aaron is your spirit baby, the one that
Yeah.
didn't make it through the birth process. And it's also the one who was in the womb with Gus,
Yes.
who disappeared.
Yeah.
There. And Gus talked to you about Aaron when Gus was growing up. Were you talking, did you share about, did you have like a shared relationship with Aaron where you would share with Gus about Aaron?
Aaron was always a topic for a long time. But it was never talked about like it was that Gus was a part of it. It was more of that I feel sad because Aaron isn't here.
Gotcha. But Gus told you that one time that he was angry at Aaron because he had left. Aaron had been there together with him in the womb and had left at that time too. So maybe he was kind of commiserating with you a little bit about Aaron not staying with you together. Yeah. Wow. So what a powerful experience. So then after Aaron left the second time, that's when you started writing to him and having a conversation with him, and he would reply, and then you were able to connect. Wow. So I can just imagine then that informed, it sounds like, your whole process with connecting with your babies moving forward.
Exactly. It really did. And for me, it would be a dream to somehow let other moms that lose their babies to know that connection is always available.
Oh my goodness, this would be such a beautiful offering that you could share. I mean, we were just talking about you being in a transition in your life, and I'm just seeing it crystal clear right now that that could be a beautiful way to support other new moms, if that was something that you were wanting to do, because this is such a
Yeah.
clear, distinct way that has arisen through you and your life circumstances, and this in-depth connection with your spirit babies is so powerful. It's not something that everyone knows is possible either,
Right.
and there's people who as a womb-centered healing practitioner, I encounter various practitioners who specialize in supporting moms through the process of losing a child or losing a baby, recovering from abortion even, or miscarriage, and that there's a real need for a sense of connection with the spirit of that child, or even fertility, preparing to have a baby, and being able and feeling like there's a baby waiting to incarnate, but not quite sure what they need to do in order to prepare, in order to be ready to help them incarnate. And so, developing the skill of connecting with the spirit baby might be a wonderful way for you to support. Have you ever supported anybody else, any friends or family members with that kind of process?
Well, my niece and I have our life path when it comes to children is a little eerie that it's so closely connected. She had lost a baby and also had a baby after, and so I'm the only one in the family that has been through that. So I've kind of supported her through that.
Did you share that writing practice with her at all?
Yeah, well, Kristen knows our story. I've been married to my husband for 26 years, so we've had many times to talk about things like that.
So you'd already shared with her about that process. Did she implement that process for herself, in her own connection with her babies?
I think she has, and she also has a bear that she talks to Juniper with, and she has other things too other than writing.
Oh, I see. So like a stuffed animal kind of bear, is that what you mean? And then she imagines talking to the bear, and then feels that the bear responds to her in her baby's voice.
Yes.
Wow. And has that been going on? I mean, does the bear grow bigger? Is it a more grown up?
No, it's just in the baby, because the baby when you lose the baby stays that size.
The baby stays. Does it stay that same age? Like, is Aaron still the age that
Aaron's
baby?
Still the baby.
Okay, so it's not like Aaron has grown up in spirit form. It's Aaron is still this.
His soul is this very gentle, holding kind of energy, spirit, and that's how he is around me. I lost my train of thought. So it's more, he's always been this really gentle soul. And each of my children have different, their energy has always been different from one another. And his is always this sweet, loving energy. His middle name is Javan, which is life, and that's exactly what he's showed us.
Wow. And so I'm curious, with your other children, your daughters, that you knew they were coming, and you started writing to them before they were coming, and you continued writing to them while you were gestating. They were gestating inside of you, and even after they were born, before they could talk. I'm curious when the writing to them kind of tapered off, and then there was more of a different kind of communication with them.
Well, if something big happens or there's a major upset, I still tend to go to the journals and write it down, that
Ah,
experience, so they don't lose it, or that some of that history they have.
and are you writing in those journals even then when they're not babies anymore? Are you writing in the form of a conversation still so that it's their spirits writing back to you?
That now it's more of a story.
Uh-huh. That you're telling them, you're back into the documentary
Yeah.
style of writing and less of the conversational style. So
Yeah.
I'm just curious when the conversational style kind of tapered out. How old were your babies?
Probably they were probably old enough to make crawling, kind of, that about that kind of stage.
Crawling. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And was there a sense of you could have an actual conversation, even if they weren't saying words, but you were having more of a verbal conversation? So then you didn't necessarily need to write the conversation with them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Interesting. Uh-huh. Yeah, because I know that, babies, even toddler, tiny babies, they start to make gibberish sounds and moms understand what they're saying, right?
Yes. Yes.
And then you got to ask the mom. If you're not the mom and you're interacting with the baby, sometimes you have to ask the mom for a translation.
Yeah. And then they become teenagers and they mumble, so it's pretty
You,
much the same.
you still understand what they're saying. Gotcha. Wow. So what a powerful thing. So, and I just want to clarify that we can have the same kinds of healing connections as we're seeing in this conversation with our descendants.
Yes.
As we do with our ancestors, and that healing energy can flow both ways. And it sounds like all of this experience with your children and the healing effects of connecting with the spirit of your children, because even with your living children, I'm imagining that this conversational relationship that you cultivated before they even came was deeply impactful for you as well. Just that ongoing, connection with the spirit world through your children. I mean, you started with talking with God, and then you're talking with the spirit of your children, and then now you're talking with the spirit of your dad. And what an impactful healing process that it has been for you.
And yes, it's been it's more healing on the other side than it is on this side. And I know that sounds weird, but I think for me, the other side, there is no walls. And the relationships here, after a while, there's walls that have been put on.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, the physicality, the structures of our physical lives, the limitations can feel like healing there's a lot more friction in the healing process, and there might be barriers or limitations to the healing process. But when you're connecting with somebody in the spirit realm, it seems like the healing can flow more freely. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. And yes, there's no the emotional ties on with earth is so much different than the emotional ties with spirit, because with spirit it's just this free flow. With earth, it's more of ego involved, and so it's not as fluid as on spirit side.
So what aspects of ego do you feel limit the flow of healing? Big question.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is our human wounding, our human trauma, our I don't want to be right, or I don't want to be wrong. You have to be wrong. All that kind of.
Some of these habits that have affected our physicality, but also the scarring and the wounding and the patterns that come up around that. But it sounds like you got to experience your father, who was so wounded when he was embodied and had such a hard time with any kind of healing with the alcoholism and the illness the illness that was. But then that in the spirit realm, it's like, their healing could happen there.
Yes.
And that you got to be part of that in this connection with your father.
Yeah. And what I've gained through this is understanding that who my father was on earth is not the same that he is now.
Mm-hmm.
His essence is the same, but all that pain that was holding him down is not there.
Mm.
He's lighter and more at peace than ever.
Right. And I can imagine that having that experience of him, and that perhaps he in his spirit form, in his lighter spirit form, might be able to support you and your family with whatever heavy stuff you might still be struggling with in your physical form. Do you experience that sometimes? Like, does he give you messages that helps you and like that?
Yeah, when things are really bad, I feel my father holding my hand.
And that gets you through, huh?
It definitely does. And if I, like a month ago, he kept being around, and I kept asking him why, and he wasn't quite ready to tell me. So there's something there that he's still like, hold my hand. And I know that from personal experience, like both my dad and Aaron, not only are they helping me, but I'm helping them to grow too. So it's not a one-sided thing, it's a mutual.
Wow. So when you feel your dad holding your hand, it could be that he's going through a process of growth in the spirit realms. It could also be that he's supporting you through a process of growth that you might not be 100% fully aware of that's happening, or he's perhaps preparing you for a process that's to come. Have you ever had that experience where you're like, okay, you're really here a lot, you're holding my hand a lot, what's going on? And he doesn't tell you, and then at a certain point it makes sense because it becomes clear.
I've had that more with Aaron than I have with my dad. With my dad, his is more of a, I know, well, not personally for me, but I know that when we have a grandson, and when things were really crazy in his life, I asked my dad to go and be with him. And I know that he did that through conversation. He said that he would do that.
Oh, wow. So he's can kind of be a healing emissary in certain circumstances as well. Wow. So powerful. Well, this has been so powerful to talk with you about all of this. Thank you so much for sharing so intimately.
Wonderful.
Yeah, this is such an intimate thing to be sharing, and I'm so glad that you're willing to share it here on the podcast for listeners to have an experience, or perhaps be able to relate to these experiences, or perhaps be able to explore the possibilities for themselves in this regard. And so I'm curious, would you be willing to share contact information if anybody wanted to reach out to you and talk to you more about this?
Sure, I would.
Do you have, like, what would be the best way for folks to contact?
Probably either Facebook or phone for the texting.
Well, right. Okay. So why don't you clearly say the name that they can find you on Facebook?
Raymora Tam Thomas.
Okay. Raymora Tam Thomas. Wonderful. And we can put your Facebook link in the show notes. So
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
beautiful. So listeners also know that if you want to learn more about the Womb Centered Healing Temple, you can visit wombcenteredhealing.com. And I'll be sharing more in the announcements for the podcast, but I just want to mention here that we're gearing up to a month-long ancestral healing course that folks can join in. So be sure to listen to the announcements about that and check that out. So we're going to be having a series of podcast episodes with guests like Raymora coming on and sharing about their ancestral healing experiences, and in the hopes that you'll be inspired to explore ancestral healing for yourself, and if it would feel supportive to you in that journey, to join us for the Ancestral Healing course, where you'll be encouraged to explore that more in a focused, structured, supportive way. So, okay, that's what we've got for today. Thank you so much for joining us, Raymora. Thank you, listeners,
Thank
for joining
you.
us. And that's all for now. Until next time.
Bye.